because we're interested in beekeeping. And we all have different reasons why we want to be beekeepers and why we started beekeeping. The reason I started beekeeping is my wife and I bought a house in the country. We planted a garden. The first year we had no bees to pollinate our watermelons. And I like watermelons and I wanted watermelons. So the adventure started. We bought one hive 25 years ago, and now we're sitting in 100. It's my full-time job pretty much. Keeps me busy, keeps me out of the bars. Every time my wife says we got to downsize, I go, well, if we downsize, that'll give me time to go to the bar. That settles that discussion. We're back to beekeeping. The press loves to scare everybody. They love to tell everybody that, all the bees are dying. The bees are going extinct. Honeybees are not going extinct. In fact, there's more honeybees now than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Actually, bees have been on decline since 1945 at the end of World War II. Before World War II, we had the Depression. People were poor. If you had bees, you had your own honey, you had your own sugar. During World War II, we had sugar rationing. So if you had your own bees, you had all the sugar you wanted. And I know people, generation ahead of me, like my dad's age, if they had bees, they actually took honey to town, traded everything they needed for the day, and they came home with money in their pocket and the grocery shopping done. I mean, that's how important bees were. Well, then after World War II, everything kind of changed. Honeybees were on decline. This shows from 1970. This graph goes all the way back to 1945. You can see the height of beekeeping. There were 6 million hives in the United States then. It did a slow decline. It just kept going down, down, down all the way. Here's 2005, and that's basically when we hit bottom, right? Right in there. That was when colony collapse happened. That was when the press loved to tell everybody, oh my God, the bees are dying. We don't know why. They're just disappearing, and it was bad. And the people that got hit by it, it was bad for them. But most of us did not see any colony collapse. Most of us, we've been fighting our varroa mites, which we'll teach you about, other pests, but really colony collapse happened to very few beekeepers. But the beekeepers that happened to were mainly commercial people. They got all the press. The press loved to run with it. And in fact, I know David probably gets this question. We do a fair every year, the Polk County Fair, and I still have people coming up to me going, hey, are all the bees still dying? We haven't seen anything lately. And it used to be about every year we do a survey, and how it's part of this survey here with research and the Honeybee Health Coalition. They send us surveys and we fill them out, and they usually get published about May or June, July. And for the last umpteen years, probably 15 years, about 40% of the bees die in the winter. And they publish that. Of course, if it's slow news week, they don't have nothing else to complain about. Up comes that, and then the phone starts ringing. Hey, how are your bees doing? Oh, my bees are doing just fine. I've had some tough winters. David's had tough winters. We've all, being beekeepers, every once in a while we have tough winters. Why? A lot of times we don't know. You do the same thing the last few years. You have 70, 80, maybe 90% survival through the winter, and then all of a sudden you go into the next year and it's a big operation, 50% loss. So I lost 50 hives. When you only have 2 or 3 bee hives in your backyard and you lose 1 or 2, that's pretty traumatic. Jake's over here nodding his head. Yeah.
It's a numbers game the way I look at it.
And once you get big enough, it is kind of a numbers game. I know I'm going to have some that aren't going to make it, but we try to do other things. This chart shows from 2000 to 2009, there was about 2.5 million bees, and now we're averaging 2.5 million. So we have a few more bees. The problem is they're making less honey. Research is showing that the average colony is only making 57 pounds of honey per colony overall. In Northwest Ohio, our bees will make a good decent hive will make 100 pounds of extra honey per person per hive. A lot of them don't do that much. Some are going to make 200, but actually in Northwest Ohio, we aren't in a really bad spot. We have lots of agriculture around. If you live outside of Toledo, it's all agriculture, but we still do pretty decent with honey. Our bees thrive pretty decent. So I know we all have different reasons for coming here. It is a difficult hobby. There's lots to learn. There's all new terminology to learn. We all have a new lingo. Any hobby has their own lingo. Golf has a lingo, snow skiing has lingo, baseball has a lingo, football, everybody has their terminology, so we have our own terminology. There's a bunch of handouts kind of around. We'll make sure you get them. One of them is a page of just terminology. What does hive mean, and what's a colony, and all that. So what is propolis? Correct. So this is a pin map of all the registered beekeepers in Fulton County. And if you think about bees fly for approximately 2 miles. So this hive here covers a 2-mile section. So bees are fairly scattered in Fulton County, but once we get to more urban areas, it gets worse. This is Wood County. And you can see there's lots of beekeepers and there's lots of people sitting on top of each other. And that is Lucas County. Wow. So when I'm out doing speeches and people go, I don't think there's any bees in my neighborhood. I never see any beekeepers. And I'll ask, well, where are you at? And you'd be surprised by being the president of this club so long. You give me your address. I go, oh, I know there's 2 or 3 beekeepers about a half mile from you. One's over here, one's over there. There are beekeepers. That is good and bad. There's pros and cons here. Our bees do not stay at home. Like I said, bees fly approximately 2-mile radius from their hive. So you pin your house on Google Maps, draw a 2-mile circle around there. Everything in that circle is pretty much fair game for your bees. Problem is when this beekeeper here isn't doing their job properly and their hive dies in August and it's full of mites. All these hives around here are gonna decide that, hey, we're gonna go over there and rob their place.
Pretty much.
Bees are very opportunistic. It is Mother Nature. We all think of the bee as being this little, nice, docile creature. You want to pet it, so nice. They're ferocious. If they can steal all the honey from their neighbor, they will do it. So as that hive is dying, it's full. They didn't take care of their mites. I'm going to throw this out. They didn't take care of their mites. They have a very high mite load. The hive is dying. It isn't dead yet, but it's dying. Your bees go over and start raiding all the honey, but they also bring all the mites back. So you think you're doing a really good job taking care of your mites. Now all of a sudden your mite numbers go crazy. And it's because you might have a bad beekeeper in your neighborhood. Maybe it's wild bees. Maybe they're in a tree. They swarmed in a tree during the summer. There can be lots of reasons, but everybody has to take care of the bees. And since my bees fly all over, it's difficult to keep them at home. Not like the dog or cat or steers or horses where you keep them penned on your property. They go where they want to go. So we all have to be good beekeepers, and the better we all are at being good beekeepers, overall everything is good. I always recommend people, they want to get started beekeeping. I recommend reading a book. Everybody here is going to get a book tonight. These are some other books that I kind of looked around, and I know they have good, authors. There's lots of good books, beginner books out there. Lots of stuff online. This is the book we're giving away with the class. YouTube. I started this beekeeping 25 years ago. There was no such thing as YouTube. There was no videos to watch. We had to read a book, have a mentor, hard knocks, lots of hard knocks. Now, I can fire up my computer and watch videos from all over the world of, we know everything. There are good YouTube videos and there are some really, really poor videos, poor education, people doing things totally wrong. Here's a few people that I trust that will show you good information. If you, come to the next meeting, go, hey, I saw this video, that video, whatever, if you want to take pictures. Canadian beekeeper, now he's from Canada. He has some really interesting stuff, but what he does in Canada is totally different than what we are doing here. It's been, for the last 3 weeks on his blog, it's been 30 below zero up there. And it's been snowing. He keeps all his bees inside of a building with ventilation. So his bees spend the winter inside. UOG is University of Georgia. UF is University of Florida. Michael Palmer is a big guy up in Vermont. Don the Fat Man Bee. He has some weird stuff, but he's like the old original YouTube beekeeping video guy. So everybody knows him. Bob Benny's from down in Georgia. Western Apiculture Society is a bee clubs out in Western, and Cayman Reynolds from Tennessee. They all have good videos. They won't steer you wrong. By taking this class, you're going to be a member of the Ohio State Beekeepers Association. They throw in a free membership with this class. They have some videos on there. We do a Sunday night, the third Sunday night of the month. We have a presenter, gets recorded. They're all up on the Ohio State Beekeepers YouTube channel when you get on their website. Scientific Beekeeping, a Honeybee Health Coalition. We have their books back here. Everybody gets one of these books. And I call this book the Bible of Mite Management. So take this home. They are also on their website. The book is on their website. The website is now interactive. So you can put in there the time of year. It's June. I got honey supers on. My mites are doing this. What treatment should I use? And it'll give you recommendations on how you should treat for your mites. Mites are the #1 killer of honeybees right now. No doubt about it. Mites kill the bee. Well, the viruses the mites are carrying are killing the bees. So we can't control the virus, but we can control the mites. So we need to control mites if you want to have healthy bees. WWW Honey is the Honeybee Health Honey Board. American Bee Journal and Bee Culture are both magazines, and we have some samples copies for you to take home here. Bee Culture donated theirs, and American Bee Journal, there's a stack over here. They are my old readings for the last 2 years. I usually give all my magazines away at bee meetings, and we hadn't had any bee meetings for a year because of the pandemic. So we got some of those. Honeybee Wealth is a Canada, so it's a Canadian university. I've been doing this 25 years. David's 15.
Somewhere in there, I've lost
And
track.
we, the education never ends. There's always something new in beekeeping, a new technique, a new way of doing things. Things just keep evolving, especially with the mites. So education is very key. We all continue to get educated. The Ohio State Beekeepers has a beginning beekeeping internship. The classes are the first Saturday of the month, February through November, and they spend about 2.5 to 3 hours showing you videos of what you should be doing in the month of February. So like the month of February, we'll show you how to put some equipment together, what you should be thinking about. March, you're going to be getting your bees. We show how to get the bees in your hive, da-di-da. And as the year progresses, we're like beginning of the month, we have this show. I'm part of the organization. In fact, I got thrown under the bus at a meeting, and I'm now chairman of this thing. Last year was our first year, so we had a lot of work getting all these videos. This year, we're just fine tuning some videos. David and I made some videos for this. So we have everything now. It'll flow a lot better, we think. But if you want to join that education, it's gonna cost an extra $20. Part of the $20 is what I found when things are free, people just blow them off. But if you got a little money in it, people go to the meetings a lot. And I know from our beginner class last year, I think we had 2 people out of about 20 that showed up for it. Now, some people, they're all recorded. So if you're busy on Saturdays, I know we all are busy on Saturdays. They are recorded, and later in the month, they are put on a private website or a private YouTube channel. So only paid people can see them. So you can play them back 3-4 times, and you can go back through them. But we're charging a little extra for that. But it's like the chart says 9 to 11:30. I know we never had one that
No.
didn't get done at 11:30. There was some that went to 1 o'clock. I know that. So it's more than 2.5, or it can go 3.5. So, and you can drop off, and there's a lot of questions and answers. We have a lot of people like me online. So you ask a question, we'll type in some answers and stuff for you, or at the end of the video or PowerPoint, we answer all the questions. More education. Getting started, you need lots of education. One of the things that when we talk about beekeepers, there's hobby beekeepers, there's sideline beekeepers who make a little money with beekeeping, and then there's the big commercial people. This is Merriam-Webster's definition of a hobby. And these are task and chore. Beekeeping should be called more of a chore. There are times where you have to do things. A hobby is like going out and play golf. Well, if it's raining today, you don't have to. If it's raining today, you don't have to work your bees, but tomorrow when the sun's out, you better look at your bees if you haven't seen your bees in a while. You can't just let the bees go. The bees gather nectar, they gather pollen, they gather their own food. But we as beekeepers have the responsibility to check, make sure everything's going okay. Is it raining too much? Do they have enough food? Do we have to feed them, supplement their food? So it's more of a regular light work, household chore like a farm. A lot of us consider beekeeping and raising bees as livestock. We treat them just like livestock. If they're hungry, we feed them. If they're sick, we try to medicate them to get them healthy. We want them healthy to live. There used to be a time back in the 70s before mites, you could put a box of bees in your backyard, put a bunch of honey supers on, which is where they store all their extra honey. And you let them sit there till fall. You came back, took the honey off, and that was beekeeping in the 70s. It's not that way anymore. I highly recommend once a week, open up your hive, see what's going on inside. It's not the cheapest thing to get going. It's going to cost $800 to $1,000 by the time you get some education, get your equipment, get some protective clothing, get some tools, buy your bees, all that. You're going to have about $1,000 wrapped in that first hive. So that first jar of honey you get is very expensive. And I've had lots of people tell me they want to get into beekeeping because they want some honey. And I'll go, well, how much honey do you guys eat? Well, we just want a few jars. I go, it's a lot cheaper to buy it from me. Even though you think our prices are high, it's a lot cheaper than buying bees and going through all this work. The first decision you really have to make is, when you get done with this class, is, do I want to stay with beekeeping? Is this what I want to do? Do I want to do it this year? There used to be a time, not too many years ago, that by end of January, if you didn't have your name on a list to buy bees, you weren't going to get bees that year. It's not quite that bad anymore. The bee business is kicked in. I mean, everything with agriculture has their niche. And a lot of beekeepers in Georgia, some in California, that their niche is raising bees to sell to new beekeepers. That's how they make their money. They're just raising more bees to sell to everybody else. And for a while, that took a while for that to kind of kick in gear when the mites and the popularity of beekeeping went up back in 2005, 6, the big wave for about 10 years. This would be a small class of beekeeping. We used to have to limit the amount of new beekeepers to 35. Because that was about all we could get in here. And that they'd sell out. All bee classes were sold out. So there were lots of new beekeepers, so there was a high demand for bees. You're gonna open up a book and you're gonna see different breeds of bees. These are the most popular ones that you see. There's pros and cons to all of them. The main thing I'm gonna tell you is none of us own hybrid bees. All the bees, the queen goes out and mates with all the drones in the neighborhood. So back to the chart in Lucas County with all those beekeepers, if you have a virgin queen out of your hive because it swarmed and all the things that Mother Nature does, she goes out, there's lots of drones for her to mate with. And that's part of reproduction in bees. So you're gonna get bees that look like Italians, act like Italians, but are they 100% Italians?
Roger, does the queen just breed with one?
No, she has lots of boyfriends.
That's right.
Several.
She's I gave this speech to a garden club one time, and one of the ladies in there, she's like 70 years old. And how does this reproduction go on? So it was all adult, so I explained it, and one lady goes, "She's not a queen, she's a slut." Well, kind of, but yeah, it's the queen's culture. The more boyfriends she has, the better queen she's going to be, because now we have genetic diversity within the hive. If she was just mating, the genetic line would be too straight. So it's multi-branched in the hives. Most of the bee suppliers sell Italian bees, mainly because that's what the commercial guys, people that own 10,000 hives, they want 10,000 Italian queens. They dictate what the rest of us kind of get. So Italians are about the #1 bee in these books. They're very calm. They make lots of honey. That's why the big commercial guys want them, because they make lots of honey. One of the disadvantages of them is they take too many bees into winter. Some of these other breeds will go through, as soon as the honey flow, which is the honey crop, the summer bounty of the bees, when it quits, they quit. The queen just shuts down laying eggs. So the population decreases before winter gets here. The Italians just keep on raising lots of bees, so they have lots of mouths to feed during winter. And my personal feeling is they don't survive winter up here quite as good as some of the others. I started with Italians. I'm sure there's
Right, 90% of us did.
started with Italians. When I started 25 years ago, there was Italians and Italians, and that was about it. And then Italian bees are very yellowish, orangey color. This is the color of what an Italian queen looked like. And then came along Carnolians, which all the names of these bees are going to look like they came from Europe, and it's because our honeybees did come from Europe. They're not native to North America. So all these lines originated in Europe and they're named from the different parts of Europe where they came from. So the Carnolians are more up in like Yugoslavia, Greece, more north than that. And they're gentle too. They winter well because they take less bees in the winter. Because they're more north, they seem to forage when it's cooler and wetter out, versus the Italians, they're from southern, Europe, they like it a little warmer. And you can see this queen looks entirely different than the other ones. The blue dot she's marked. Somebody put some paint on her so we can find her easier. Then along came Russian bees, which are from the Russian area. They're even further north. they've been around the mites the longest. The mites, when this mite started on a different breed of bees, and when it jumped species, it jumped in Northern Asia many years ago. I think back in the 30s, 20s. So the varroa mite that we're fighting now yet has been around for 70, 80 years. They first were around the Russian. So the Russian bees have kind of adapted to some of the mite things and some of these other breeds. And that's where we as a beekeeping community are trying to raise better, stronger genetic bees to survive the mites, to fight the mites off so we don't have to treat them. The meeting last night, we talked about putting chemicals on our bees, chemicals on the lawns. We're trying to make better bees through genetics. But it will take a long time. We're not close yet. Sometimes we have a little bright light that looks like, oh, this is going to go good, but then part of the breeding thing with the queen, they, having many boyfriends. If she has boyfriends from poor genetics, she has some poor genetics in the hive. She's got some good genetics in the hive. The bees winter well. They build up very fast in the spring. They shut off in the fall. They have queen cups around. People get worried about those. The honey yield isn't quite as good. She's very dark. You can see how she's almost black. So honeybees come from the color of yellow to black, any color in between. Saskatraz is the new darling queen on the market. She was developed up in Saskatchewan, Canada through a breeding program. I think there's only technically one outfit in California that sells like Saskatraz queens. Everybody else will sell off breeds of the Saskatraz. They might call them Saskatraz, but she was mated in Northwest Ohio. She's not a real Saskatraz. And you can see she's a darker bee too. And they're supposed to do excellent winter, good honey production, resistant to some varroa and some other diseases. And that's where the hygienic behavior, there's a couple different ways that our bees are controlling the mite. Some is through hygienics, some is through chewing behavior where they chew the mite. Some they can detect the mite in the cell, they pull them out. So there's different ways our bees are trying to fight the mites off. And then there's some Caucasians. These are going to be the hardest ones you ever find to buy. They're gentle, they're a dark bee. The reason people didn't like them is they made propolis. Propolis is a sticky substance that the bees make in their hive. They collect tree sap and they plug all the holes in their hive with this sap. And when it's in the hive at temperature, it's about 92 degrees, it's like bubble gum. So it gets all over your fingers, your clothes, my truck, you name it, they have propolis on it.
I still got propolis on my truck from last summer.
Yeah.
I couldn't clean off.
I
Be a new truck. Well, I'm trying to say, it's a new truck and I still didn't manage to, even with hot water, get it removed.
So, yeah, I have it on my steering wheel. It's permanently embedded on my steering wheel. So beekeepers hated that. We do not like this, so they bred bees so they didn't have propolis. Well, lo and behold, there's a reason for the propolis. Propolis is antimicrobial and bacterial. So in the wild, as like the sheet you gave me, Steve, they'll talk about the bees in a wild cavity will coat the whole thing with propolis, and it's their first line of defense against germs and bacteria because they got the whole house coated with this antimicrobial stuff. And they glue it all together. So now all of a sudden we're figuring out propolis is a good thing instead of a bad thing. And now you can go to the health food store and buy a tincture with propolis in it, and it's supposed to help sore throats and all kinds of stuff because it's got good qualities to it. But all it is tree sap and bee spit. Next year, once you decide, well, maybe I want an Italian queen or Russian queen, you're going to have to decide how I want to buy these bees. Do I want to buy a package of bees or do I want to buy a nuke? And this is a package of bees. I brought a package over here. It's a square box. Excuse me. You can get them in 2, 3, or 4 pound. 3 is the most common. Finding 2s and 4s is abnormal. I did see online, looking around, putting everything together again this year. I did find a 4 pound package. I found somebody selling 2 pounders. The 3 pounds is the normal. And in this box, all you're getting is bees and a queen. There'll be a queen in the middle. There'll be a little can of sugar feed in there. So while they're in transit from Georgia or California to Ohio, they have some food for their way here. That's what you're buying. And the prices, yeah, about 10,000 bees in a 3 pound package. And you can see the price. The price is running now from 120 to the people that are selling the Saskatraz queens is $201 for a 3 pound package and a Saskatraz queen. A nuke. A nuke is a mini starter hive. They sell as 4 or 5 frames usually, and you can see in the picture that there's 5 frames in this box covered with bees. And in the nuke, you should have a queen that is laying eggs in there. When you pull that frame out, it should have eggs. It should have small brood, big brood, cat brood. That should be her prodigy in there. As in any industry, there's always the people that cheat people. And it's been known to buy a 5 pound package and the guy goes, well, you're gonna have to let your queen out in 3 days. No, that queen should have been left out 2 weeks ago. So they're selling you the price of a nuke, but all you have is a modified package. The queen's still in the cage, you're getting somebody's frames, but she may die. The queen, the producer of the nuke, has taken the responsibility of the queen getting out to lay eggs to get started. Sometimes when you're in the package, you let them all out, they don't like the queen, she gets killed, she leaves. The quality of queens sometimes can be inferior, but that could happen with the nuke too. But the nukes will cost you a little more, but you're getting a jump start on your hive. Now you have 5 frames, you got honey in there, you got comb for the queen to lay in. It's a head start. Hive anatomy. I'm gonna turn this over to Deb. I have contracted a few people that will help explain the different parts of a beehive. So probably the 2 most important things is what kind of bees you want to buy and how you're going to buy it. Next is you're going to need some equipment to put the bees in.
I use all medium boxes, 5 boxes, because I'm not that super strong. When I first started beekeeping, they always told everybody you need to start with a big box of beets to get your brood going. I run my brood all in medium boxes and they are quite happy. I work by myself. I can't list one of those boxes by myself.
That box will become 90 pounds if it's full of honey in a heartbeat. Versus 45 to 50 pounds.
And as a woman, it's not as easy. So if you go to the
Box always
medium,
like to see they're the same height.
yeah. Mediums are lighter.
Mediums are just shorter.
When you,
like 6
Yeah.
and 5/8
when you
versus
go to
9.
supers, when you're setting up honey supers, you can even run shallows like this. This is a shallow box, and you can see the difference in the size of this. But I run all medium so that all of my equipment is the same. All the frames fit in every box. And then you want to start with what you're going to use for your bottom board. I use screen bottom boards where these slide out. I spray this with Pam cooking spray. And it's one of the ways that varroa will fall down in there and you can kind of get an idea, a little bit of an idea. It's not a valid way to tell, but you can see if you have some high varroa counts, especially in the wintertime. But you have to keep cleaning the bottom boards. You have to slide these out and clean them off, otherwise they'll get all clogged up. I still like it, green bottom boards, but you can use solid bottom board like this on the bottom of your hive. So that's totally up to you, which of those you want to use. And then you put a box on there, and then sometimes I used these my first year, I haven't used them much since. They're queen excluders, otherwise known as honey excluders. They keeps the queen down below so that you get your honey nice and clean up above, but I haven't had that much trouble with having just a little bit of brood in with my friends. But if you want to throw a queen excluder on there, you can. A box or two before you do that. Build up your frames. Queen excluder on there. Put another box on top of that for your honey to build up in there. And then you're going to go with your inner cover on top of that box. When I was first started working with bees, I didn't know why you needed that. Why can't you just put a cover on that? Well, they build propolis on top of there, you'll never get your lid off. You put an inner cover on there. The top notch of the inner cover you want up in the summer, down in the winter. It's just better for ventilation for your bees. And then you're going to put your telescoping lid on top of that. And then I always use a ratchet strap to hold it all down and hold it. My husband built me hive skins I sit them on top of, and I ratchet strap them down onto my hive skins. There's a lot of people who've had hives blown over, knocked over, all kinds of things. Tree branches hit them and they fall over, but a ratchet strap will hold it on there pretty good. A lot of other people just use a rock or a brick on top of them, so that's up to you. So that's kind of what I do.
Especially if you're in the country where we get so much wind.
Use concrete blocks. I did that for a few years. My hive stands look kind of like this, though, not like that, like that one over here, like this. I have mine individually because I like to work from the side of my hives. Once again, I'm not that tall. I can't reach that far. It's a lot easier to just pick them up from the side and look at them as opposed to going this way and looking up the frames.
There's many different ways to, we don't want to set your hive on the ground. We want to get it up off the ground so it stays drier around it. It'll also make it a little easier to work on, especially when you're down to the bottom box. You don't have to reach down to your ankles. You don't want to get it too tall. There's kind of a height thing. If you get it too tall, then in the summertime, you're up here.
Now you're dragging out a step ladder.
Or you're dragging out a step ladder, correct. So there's always the happy medium. A lot of people build long benches like this or stand. I'm with Deb. I don't like the stand because I gotta reach around. All mine sit on cement block, so I can work from the side. I don't like working from the back, you have to reach over. That's probably the disadvantage of it. The other thing, it keeps it all together. If you do build a stand, I'll tell you to overbuild it, because Gail over here had one built and they didn't put a leg in the middle. And as the summer went on, the one board kept swaying more and more and more to the point was, I think they're gonna slide off, Gail. Let's get it. We got cement block underneath it, so it wouldn't sag anymore, but.
And that particular colony went 9 boxes high. We had to ratchet strap it. That's why it was so heavy, because there was like 4 boxes of honey. The girls were hauling in nectar as fast as we could put boxes in there to draw
8 or
out.
10 frame?
I do an 8 frame.
Okay, so figure how much weight in each box?
Well, that's the good thing about 10 and 8.
No, well,
for a woman.
it would still weigh quite a bit.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
we
saying.
aren't quite to the 8 frame yet.
That's
So-
a shallow.
Bottom boards come as, like Deb said, solid or screen. When they first started screen bottom boards, 30% of the mites were supposed to fall through that screen bottom board. They'll get stuck on that. Well, later research shows it's not quite that high. Some mites do fall off. I like to use screen bottom boards, pull the tray out when it's really hot in the summer so they have a little more ventilation. And also, if I do some kind of mite treatment, the dead mites fall on that tray. When you pull them out, you can look. When it's on a solid bottom board, the bees with their wings just blow all the mites outside. You don't have a testing area. They used to make some plastic ones. I haven't seen plastic bottom boards in a long time, but they were pretty chintzy. Back to the hibernate, where the queen's gonna raise brood. Do you want a deep box or you want some medium? So you gotta decide on the size. There's lots of things to get started here. Most of the kits do come with queen excluders. I have a whole bunch. I'm with like Deb. I don't use too much anymore. They are a tool in your toolbox. There are certain times where you should use it, but as a new beekeeper, the first year, I would not put that queen excluder on so they get all of your comb drawn out. The bees do not like squeezing through that screen, which is just big enough for a worker to go through, but not the queen to go up there and work. And it seems so it's like putting a lid on them. They just quit going up through there. And then now they're jammed in your bottom boxes and they have a tendency to swarm. So the first year, I really recommend not putting those on. The honey supers, again, they get heavy, so we make smaller boxes. The old timers, when I first started beekeeping, they all came to bee meetings, kind of walking like this, because all they did was work, their bees were in deep boxes. So they picked up these 90-pound boxes, stacked them up year after year, and they all had bad bags. So maybe as younger generation, we're getting a little smarter because things have really changed. Again, there's something else that changed. When I first started, all you had to have, your bees were always in deep boxes and the honey went in the mediums and shallows. But nowadays, we're putting 3 medium boxes on the bottom. Deb runs like 3 mediums, Gail runs 3 mediums. They're a lot lighter, easier for people to pick up. Doesn't matter if you're male or female, we're all getting older. The inner cover, like Deb says, that's just to kind of keep this lid from getting glued in. The lids that you'll use, they're telescoping lids, the skirts come down over the side. The bees will propolize that. They propolize every seam in your hive, and they will seam your lid down, and now you can't get your hive tool in there to keep your lid off, and it can be a real problem. So
Roger.
basically the inner covers to keep the lid from getting glued down. You can pick the lid off and then you can get here and use your hive tool to get your inner cover off. Yes, Dave?
You know, you're talking about running 3 mediums or you run
Yep.
deeps. Something you should remember is that if you're trying to run the same size throughout your colony, it gives you the advantage of being able to move things around much easier. There was one year I started with a deep and I thought I'd go up to mediums, which was working like a dream until the bees started doing some things. And I thought, well, I just move, well, I can't move it around now because a deep is deeper than a medium. And so you can't pick it up. You can take the medium down to the bottom, but then you've got space down there that creates. So I guess what I'm saying is kind of think about which one you want to use and stick with it if you can, because it'll make life easier once the bees move in.
Or you have more than one colony, but I'm with Dave. I started out with deeps. I had mediums. I got shallows. It never fails. When you're a brand new beekeeper, you only got 2 hives. You got enough frames for your 2 hives. Oh, neighbor calls up. Hey, there's a swarm of bees over here. So now where do you put them in? Oh, I got a box. Oh, I don't have the right size frames in. Either you got a deep box with medium frames or medium frames and a deep box. It always would happen. And it still happens 25 years later, either that or I pick up the box and I didn't put all the frames in. We can tell you all kinds of stories. Any story that's imaginable, us experienced beekeepers, we've done at least one. Back to the lids. You put the lid on top. There's migratory lids. This is just basically a wooden lid that they put on. The commercial guys do it because they stack bees on top of one hive on top of the other with a forklift, so they can put them on a truck to move.
Every inch becomes valuable at
Yeah.
that point to that semi-load.
So they don't want this metal lid, extra space. The metal lid's gonna do you the best keeping the weather out. Basically, one of the things as a beekeeper, we're providing them a dry space to live in. And the metal lids work really good. They also make full styrofoam hives now. And so you can get a styrofoam lid to put on. It's like high density styrofoam, it's very thick. So what size of equipment you need? This is, back to like Dave said, you can use deeps. A lot of people use 1 deep on the bottom and then mediums above that. Renee, is that how you do yours?
Yes.
Yeah, Renee does hers that way. So she has one deep on the bottom and then the rest is all mediums. Deb does all mediums, right? So anything in beekeeping, there is no one way of doing it. You know, what works for you, you know, you got to decide how you want to get started. And you can always change. I think Renee you were gonna do all mediums, right? Yeah. She was gonna do all mediums, but then she decided to do deeps. Part of the problem is if you're gonna go with a nuke, most of the nuke producers produce deep frames. There are some medium frames out there, but they're very limited. So that's one of the drawbacks of how you're gonna put bees in. 8 and 10 frame. When I first started, if I was told somebody I want an 8-frame box, it would look at me like I was stupid and I'll get them. But with the evolution, we have more and more female beekeepers, and now we have 8-frame equipment. So instead of putting 10 frames in there, it only holds 8. It's not as heavy. Gail's going to talk a little bit about 8 frames. She has all 8 frames. She's in all mediums. So doesn't matter where her frame goes, they fit in every box.
Because when I got introduced into beekeeping, because I work out at Sutter Village, the gentleman who had originally started the apiary had left. So there was like 2 massive colonies out there. I knew nothing about beekeeping, never took an introductory class. You guys are very fortunate because this is giving you a head start. And it came into my department because nobody on the site wanted to do anything with it. And we didn't know if they survived the winter or not. So the original gentleman had started out with all the medium sized boxes, and we used medium sized frames. 8 frames is what I use, and I stuck with it. Well, me being a woman, it's a whole lot easier to pick up, haul around the 8 frames, and especially with the 10 frames, you have 10 frames in one box. You figure if, like David said earlier, if they fill that deep full of honey, I mean, you're talking over 90 pounds that you got to move that box with. And most generally in a deep, the frames, just one frame weighs approximately about 10 pounds. So if you move, and they usually, the queen and the brood usually stays in the center like a football. They usually don't use the outside of the boxes too much because they've discovered by research that they like not so much open space areas. They like a little bit more closeness. So with the deep, when you take 2 of those frames out there that weigh 10 pounds apiece, you're going from taking 20 pounds out down from 90 down to about 70, 75 pounds. That's still quite a bit. Even with my mediums, you need for your brood chamber, which you use like the deep back here for your brood down at the bottom. Some of them, the old standard used to be 2 deeps and then 1 medium, or you could use a shallow. With me, for the brood chamber, you need 3 mediums for the queen, for the brood area. And then the 4th box would be for that I would use for a medium honey super all 8 frame. I found for myself is that it's more convenient for me to stay with the same equipment. It's a little bit more cost effective, especially if I have a deep and I'm out in the apiary and I need to maybe interchange my equipment, and oh, guess what? Oh, all I have in the honey house and the beekeeping equipment is, oh, I've got deeps, but I don't have enough mediums. So now what am I going to do? So for me, it's consistency. It's more convenient doing the 8 frame. And mine is up, like Roger was saying, they originally were on the like the concrete blocks, but the problem is, and it's probably a good thing that I did go this direction, because at the site we've had floods and there's a ditch that runs along the area, and this last year when it rained, because the hives were up on this, the water went right underneath it. Because I do have some bricks out there that are a little bit lower, And if the hives were on that brick, the water would have came right across, right into the pasture. It was all underwater. So in one aspect, it's good. But the other aspect is, like that one year that we had talked about, I mean, them girls were pulling out so much honey. What was it? We had like 44 frames that they had drawn out the foundation in like, I don't know how many weeks. I mean,
And filled with honey.
and filled with honey. It was astounding. I mean, these girls were like workaholics. And the particular type breed that, bee that I had, they were chewers. So they would take my entrance reducers and they chewed it. I thought I had carpenter or something going on, and come to find out it was the girls chewing the wood. So I had to have Tiffin River Works make me some entrance reducers that were made out of oak so they wouldn't chew them up. They actually, I mean, they rounded them. There's another one in Club and Black Swamp Beekeepers has their bees that are chewers also.
Which is not a bad.
Which is not a bad thing, because they chew the bromide, they chew the legs off and, yeah, which isn't a bad thing.
So yeah, there's many ways of
So that's
doing
nice.
beekeeping, and I've helped Gail over the years. Gail always goes, man, those boxes are heavy. I go, oh no, they're nothing compared to 10 frame boxes. So 8 frame medium box is definitely lighter than one of my 10 frame shallows even. So I know they are lighter. And if I had to do it all over again, I'm pretty sure I'd probably have done all mediums. Just because, especially starting out, I was always scrambling, taking up pieces and parts. They do make some styrofoam hives now. I have never owned any. I've helped some people with their styrofoam hives. They're probably their claim to fame is there's more insulation for winter. Other than that, you're supposed to paint them just like you would your other, so they last. They probably don't take the abuse of wood with the hive tool. The hives that I worked on, they weren't quite right. There was too much bee space, so they had a lot of problems. There wasn't any, and they had things moved down. So my experience with it is kind of wishy-washy. I'm sure some of it's better now. There are some companies that, they sell a lot of styrofoam. Dave, you had any experience with styrofoam?
No, just I go back to Joe and always complain about our old bee inspector being so abusive too, because
Oh,
Well, there's a type of styrofoam now that's almost like a plastic. I have a friend, Tom Muir, who does those. They're pretty slick. They're
Are they?
pretty nice. The lids are really nice. They have a nice insulation to them, and year round, they seem to be really nice.
okay.
They're a little pricey, but they're nice. It's nice equipment.
Roger,
Yes, sir.
the type of wood this make,
Most of it's pine, but there are people that do cypress.
pine because it's cheaper.
Yep. And
it's lighter.
yeah, it's
I mean,
lighter.
let's put it this way, every so often we get somebody that has a ton of oak per se that they build up themselves, you're doing oak, wow.
You
You
gotta
pick
lift
up.
it.
You've lifted the price of, or lifted a wood box from pine to oak or some of the other hardwoods. You'll go, oh, this sucker's heavy.
The other
Yeah.
thing you'll notice on all the, I don't want to say good, but you'll notice on a lot of boxes is the joints. The finger
Dovetail.
joints.
Dovetail, yes.
Well, it's not dovetail, it's a box joint. I've seen people who think, well, I can make a rabbit joint or I can miter joint. They look great as soon as they're done. And then when you stick 100 pounds of honey, or you're trying to pry that box, I mean, when those boxes are put together by the bees, I mean, you stack them and the bees lock them in. And when you start getting in there with your tool and getting them apart, you better have good corners, because the last thing you want to do is have a box full of bees come apart and you don't have another box ready.
Since I can elaborate on Deb and her ratchet straps. And I should have stock in ratchet straps and I don't. I've had hives blow over off the stand, land on the ground and not break apart.
Mm.
All you have to do is just stand them back up, because if they're prop lights that good, they fell off, hit the ground, and don't break apart. Stand them back up. Usually got some really bad bees, they have a good reason to.
Now, as far as paint,
Oh, we're getting there, but
okay,
we're gonna talk about paint. in a minute. I've never seen the plastic hives like this, look like milk crates. So I don't know how well they hold up. But they're for sale. You can buy fancy lids. I've seen the fancy lids in people's yards. You're keeping the bees dry. And whatever, whatever your budget is, I think that lid's over $100. Probably to now, it's probably 200, do you?
I have a couple of them, but I don't like them because you can't stack anything on them like a rock to hold the lid down when it gets real windy and that kind of stuff. So they're pretty, but
Yep.
they're not very practical.
Plus I use that lid, when I start pulling apart boxes, that's the first place I proceed to park that first box is on. I flip that lid upside down and I'll set that first box on top of it. I'm going through 2, 3 dozen, half dozen boxes. Because the worst thing you can do is crush bees, because then you got upset bees. Will be polite tonight, I see there's ladies here. And so that means they come out with all their stingers and they want to visit you first.
And if you set your hive down in the grass, you're gonna have grass stuck to it, dirt stuck to it. So most of us take our flat lid, flip it over, put that on the ground, then stack our equipment on top of that. So they stay clean. We don't have bees scattered in the grass. We're not smashing bees. So
But these lids don't do that.
yeah, and I take care of somebody's hive, and they don't have a copper lid, but they got a lid like that, and it's a pain in the butt. Just like I said, I don't have any place to put it. If you're inclined to build your own equipment, I mean, there's nothing against it. I Googled beehive plans and this kind of stuff come up. There's some plans on Pinterest. Source has some. It's a website. Everything has to be very specific. There is what we call bee space. So the bees want 3/8 of a gap between, when they draw their combs out, they want 3/8 of an inch gap here. If you get things too tight and the bees can't get through there, they will just propolize it because they can't patrol it. Or if it's too wide, you made your box a little too wide, you only put 9 frame, they will hang an extra piece of comb in there to take up that room. So they don't care, us as humans, how we build it, but they will redesign it for us, the way they want it. And so some of these dimensions have to be very, pretty close. So what I usually recommend, if you're a woodworker and you really want to do it, either really follow the plans or you buy one and use it as a pattern. I know Dave does a lot of woodwork.
I've got a point where I think I build tops, inner covers and baseboards.
Yeah, the other day.
For one simple reason is I deal with an Amishman, and I'm sorry, I can't buy wood, let alone my time, to cut one. I mean, I assemble it all, but to cut that wood, finger joints and all the rest of that, I can't do it for the amount
Price
for
he
the
doesn't-
price.
Yeah, I
Because when
can't,
he makes finger joints, he has one machine, he pulls down one lever and it cuts every finger joint in one swoop. So it's 5 seconds, he flips it around, pulls again, another 5 seconds, and that side of that box is done.
well, I can't go to Lowe's and buy the wood
This is true,
for what he sells stuff for.
and Dennis is what is all clear stock when you buy a box.
So, but there are people that want to build their own, they can continue to build their own. I was thinking the other day, he has a wood.
Oh,
shop.
I'm sorry.
No, I would stick to bottom boards and telescoping covers and inner covers, and those you can save a lot of money on, because you can get scrap wood from a friend, or somebody's got some plywood they're not using, and they're a lot more forgiving. You really can't beat a good box that's made commercially.
Top bar hives, we've been talking about Langstroth. Langstruth's the standard. There are, another version of keeping bees, and it's in a top bar hive. There, you're not only picking up the frame. That frame you pull out with bees on is the only thing you pick up. You don't have to pick up the heavy boxes, a lot less work. Is there anybody interested in the top bar hives? Because we have a couple bee club members. If nobody's interested, we'll learn about other things. if we have some people that are interested, we do have some members that do keep, they keep this kind of top bar height where it's slanted. They do make another box, that looks like a coffin, that you just put the regular Langstroth frames in. So big long box, put your bees in. Different kind of management because your bees are going this way instead of this way. But if anybody's interested, let me know and I can have them come in. I don't keep bees that way, so that's why I bring, the nice thing about being in a club is I can bring club members in that do it this way and they can teach, so. You're gonna open up these bee catalogs. There's some catalogs here and stuff. Go online and look. I got some sheets. Beginner kits, you can buy the beginner kit. It's got your hive, a starter hive, maybe a book, feeder, hive tool. Usually the clothing is pretty low grade. You're only gonna get a veil, some really cheap gloves. A lot of times they don't give you enough boxes. Make sure if you do get a kit, you get more than just 2 boxes. You're gonna need 4, 5, 6. This is Ohio, and like I said, our bees do make honey around here, and you need some boxes. And there's nothing worse than end of June, July, your boxes are all full of honey, and you call up the supplier and they don't have anything in stock. Now you're really scrambling.
Well, and for all the new beekeepers here, I'm sure you're all thinking and planning about your bees and what you're gonna do. And in the spring, you'll buy your boxes. Everybody in the world is gonna buy boxes in the spring, I guarantee it. And the better boxes, or the people that make the boxes, the more customers they have, the more orders they have to fill. If you're really convinced you're going to have bees, start putting that stuff together now, because come spring, just like nukes, there may not be any around, and you may get shut out. So, and the other thing it does is it offsets your cost a little bit, to where instead of spending $800 in 1 month, you spend $100 here and $100 there, and it stretches it out over the year.
A lot of free shipping around.
Over $100 that you buy, it's free shipping, something like
It's usually not the boxes as much as frames. Frames they seem to run out of in the summertime. I've seen people on back order half the summer trying to get frames. So these days we talk about assembling the boxes. You can buy them assembled. I've showed up at people's houses, and the UPS man has dropped off their hive. They cut the cardboard box open and throw the bees in. They're ready to go. So they're painted, everything. Just depends on what you want to do. The 2 days back there, and Deb's husband put stuff together, Jacob. I like putting my own equipment together that I can. That way I know it's put together right. The big suppliers aren't too bad, but Tractor Supply, Rural King seem to sell bee equipment in the spring, and I'm not really sure where they get it, if it comes from China or what, but I've seen some really, really poorly assembled equipment come out of like the Rural Kings and that. I helped the lady get started and she was having problems, so I did a house call, and the box was not even 2 months old and it was already pulling apart. They didn't put enough nails in it. They probably didn't glue it. So we recommend gluing in that, and we go over in part of a class, we talk about assembly and the proper way of doing that. You can buy assembled stuff. Just like everything, it all costs more. You can buy everything assembled, or you can assemble it yourself. You get it in pieces like that, and then you glue and nail it together.
yeah,
I
Get you
assemble my
something to do in winter.
boxes,
it's like a winter project.
Yep.
and then I have somebody put my frames together for me, because I don't have the equipment to do the frames, but I'll put the boxes together and then I'll paint them.
And for foundation, I got some samples up here. If you guys want to look later, there's plastic foundation and there's real wax foundation. The real wax foundation is really what the bees like. Does take a few more instruments to get it all put together. You're gonna have to put some wire to reinforce it. You don't want it falling apart, so there's wire involved, eyelets, and better. Better Bee now makes already drawn comb. One of the big things when you're a brand new beekeeper is you have no drawn comb. The queen does not have any place to lay eggs without drawn comb. The bees does not have any place to store pollen and honey. They make this like an artificial paraffin wax type comb. It's fully drawn. We had a new member last year buy it, and I think that was his second time with bees. And the first time he kind of learned, what's your name again? Jay. Jay's had bees. He had bees last year, so he knows about drawn comb, and you never have enough of it. Well, he knew that. He tried this Better Bee stuff. It is pretty pricey, but it worked for him, and he got, the bees had drawn comb, so they took right off. But I think it's 10 sheets is $55, so for deeps and 43 for mediums of this 10 frame drawn stuff.
The bees seem to take to it okay?
No, he didn't use it, another guy did in our class last year. He told me about it. So, because I recommend, last year, 2 years ago was the first I've heard of this, so it's like, I'm not real familiar with it. It's like an option, but you do have to draw. And this kid, it worked for him, and his bees took right off, and I think you do have to put a little wax on it or something. Frames come different ways. I personally like a wooden frame with either a plastic insert or a real wax foundation. They do make these full frames. That was the original plastic frame right there. I see some of my old ones chipping because the plastics get brittle, but then again, I gotta think they are 25 years old. Like this is Dave and I, most people have frames like this, wooden frame with plastic insert. They do come different colors, the inserts. The black is great for seeing your eggs. The eggs are white, and on a white background, they're very hard to see. They're very small. Everybody goes, looks like a grain of rice. It looks like a very miniature grain of rice. Very small.
It took me 10 years and some black foundation before I saw my first eggs. I mean, I still, if that's the only way I could even think about seeing eggs would be on black foundation.
So the advantage of black is you can see, and that's all I buy is black foundation so I can see eggs better. Some people go, well, the black for the brood and the white's for extracting. That's a fallacy. The black extracts. So whatever color if you want, the white or yellow. Painting. We're to the painting. Dave, you want to talk about paint?
Sure.
Dave's
my
a
business
paint,
anyways.
yeah, Dave's a painting contractor.
Pretty.
I use strictly latex. I like a good grade of primer, and I tend not to like primer and paint mixed combo together. One, because I'm paying through the nose for that, and B, when you start taking and doing 4 different variables to do one project, something loses out in the long run. So I tend to like to run a good primer and a good top coat, preferably something that has some gloss to it because it will wear better. I love Wooster, Wooster and now Sherwin-Williams, who owns Purdy, makes a little 4-inch roller that has literally a cage built into it. So it looks like just kind of like a regular paint roller, but it's only 4 inches. I use them all the time for everything from waxing frames to painting boxes, because I can, with one dip, I can catch basically one side completely, come back with a paintbrush and catch the handles and call it good. Don't be afraid to hit like your Sherwin-Williams or Century 21 that's up the street here. I'll guarantee you that they got some mist tints there that you can buy. Great quality paint for a $5 bill, $2 bill. I had a 5-gallon bucket given to me the one day when I went in and asked Steve if he had any mist tints. Granted, it wasn't the greatest grade of paint, and I won't use that label anymore for my construction projects, but it worked out fine. I still got it on hives. Granted, it was a flat too, that was the other half of it that I really didn't like. It was a bunch of little personal things. When I get done with the roller, you don't have to go wash it out. Go knock it off that frame, I don't care what frame you use, or your brush. And you can just put it in a Ziploc bag, take all the air out of it. Yep, I've had roller skin sitting in the shade for 2 months behind a fence. Be perfectly fine, come back. Granted, maybe the edges might still be a little stiff, but not to the point where it bothered me. I mean, it was livable. Cause that saves you time, huh?
It won't bother the bees.
No, oh yeah, no, it won't bother the bees. The latex is perfectly fine. If you're a diehard, yeah, you can use oil. I don't see any reason to use oil the way the latex products are going these days. The only thing you want to paint really of the box is the exterior shell of it. Sure, you're going to potentially come up with some, I'll call it slop on the top edges or the bottom edges. Just flat, take your rag or finger or something and wipe it out and move on. Don't get bent on painting those edges, because I'll guarantee you 2 years from now, those whole edges will be so full of propolis that it doesn't matter one way or the other, because they glued it one way or the other. Anything you want to add to that? Mike?
Menards seem to have the best price of mist tint paint too. They're a lot better than Lowe's and Home Depot.
Oh, Lowe's and Home Depot.
They don't mark mist tints down, but Menards has a place in the back, but paint, it's always the same place in all the stores, and it's $5 a gallon. for mist tint.
Also, if you know a painter, a lot of times they have extra paint that they're just willing to give you.
Or just let your family know you're looking for some
Exterior paint.
exterior latex paint. And 2 or 3 quarts of paint will get you a long way through.
And
And stencil them and make them pretty.
Color,
Yeah.
you'll color and, yeah, go ahead.
Because the
There's
bees have
no paint
pride
on
too.
the inside, though, right?
The
No,
other
paint on
thing,
inside.
you know, that I've got a point that I do
Make that there.
Yeah,
is
'cause
I
this is
got some
gonna be
specialized,
Weatherized safe.
I got some specialized equipment. So I've made it a habit that specialized equipment all gets painted the same color. I don't use that color for anything else but that type of equipment. I do all 3 sizes. I do shallows, mediums, and deep boxes. Well, I was always throwing shallow frames into medium boxes accidentally. So I started painting all my shallow boxes a dark green box, just so that I can go, aha, this frame is a shallow frame, and there's no ifs and but where it belongs. It just makes life easier.
And any color works.
These don't care.
These don't really care, but there's red and brown, they see the same color, so really the blues, yellow, orange, think about the color of flowers. Probably the best color for bees. Green's not a good color for bees because you don't see green flowers. Bees do see in a different wavelength than we do, see a little different, but you can paint designs on them. People make them fancy. The bad thing about making a whole stacked up hive and put a big old mural on it, pretty soon you're gonna flip those boxes around and now half the mural's on the bottom and the other half's on the top. So just think about that. If you're making a mural, make the mural box for box maybe, but I see that sometimes people, oh, those look nice, wait till they get them out there and they flip them over and have to rotate them and.
Nothing else, a lot of times, especially for my nuke boxes that I make up, because I'll end up doing 10, 15 nuke boxes side by side, right down the line, so that the bees can identify, well, this is my home. I'll take a totally different color and I'll just gently dip the edge of my paintbrush in and I'll start doing some crazy lines on it in one way or the other, or some different strokes, because they're all going to be different at that point. And so it's basically lets them key into that this is a different home from my neighbors down the line, and helps control some of that.
That's kind of what this picture shows. One of my bee yards, I try to not put the same color box next to each other to help the bees orientate into the correct hives. I do number, well, half of them have numbers, so each stack has a number on it. We'll talk about, keeping track, keeping journals. If you only have 2 hives in your backyard, you got yellow hive and blue hive. That works. I got lots of hives, so I need numbers. And that way I keep track. I have a 3-ring notebook. I put notes in for all my hives when I work. Boxes that are brown are permanent winter honey for the bees. It never gets extracted, put in the, like the food chain. So if I treat these bees with some kind of miticide and that box is on it, basically that honey's contaminated for human consumption. So all my boxes that are like that, the honey never gets extracted in. That's bee food permanent. But I do the same, kind of the same thing. That way, if I happen to put another medium on top of this, I know that one's not the one I want to extract. So I do some painting schemes too on every color. Look at the colors, bees don't care. You're gonna need some tools. Definitely get a smoker. There's people online, you'll see people online going, oh, you don't need to smoke your bees, never smoke your bees, it hurts your bees. Well, I'll tell you what, someday when you go out there and your bees are having a cranky day and you don't have a smoker, you're gonna find out how cranky they are. And they'll let you know. I highly, highly recommend always having your smoker lit, it's ready to go. If you puff on your hive a couple times and the bees are calm and you can work the rest of the day, fine. I like my smoker and sometimes it sits there and just burns and I don't need it, but it's ready to go if I open up a hive that is having a bad day. If you really get the bees really just pissed off, really bad somewhere, and they're doing this stinging thing. You live in town, now they're trying to sting the neighbor's dog, you know, you could just have a really bad thing. So make sure that the smoker's lit. That's back to seeing some of these videos on YouTube when people are recommending crazy things. No veil, no smoker, fine. These bees are good, and the next thing you know, the girl's running out of the video. She's getting stung.
And it's no fun getting
They
stuck
were
in the
in her
face.
hair. She had big old long hair, and I could tell she was doing
Yeah,
that.
I've done that.
I'll tell you something about a smoker though too, is it'll take you a couple of years to figure out how to light a smoker to keep it going.
Amen.
So one thing that I would pick experienced beekeeper's brain about early is how to light a smoker. Because the one thing that even if you have a smoker, you're working your bees, they're gonna get a little testy with you. You go to smoke them, calm down. Oh no, my smoke's out. And then you're running out of the apiary again. So
One of the, on that same subject matter, one of the tools that, granted, I go through too many of them, is that self-igniting torch for plumbers use. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's the only way to light a smoker. It's down, it's sturdy, it's fast, you got constant flame that you're building that smoker load up. As soon as you get some coal going in there, or some charcoal going, usually they'll stay lit.
We've all had experiences with smokers, many different ways, and there's lots of things to use. I use like burlap, pine cones, pine needles, and I also use hardwood pellets. I am pretty frugal, everybody knows me, but 2019, it was a rainy summer, so I own part of a pine forest, so I have plenty of pine cones, pine needles. It rained and rained and rained, and it was always wet, 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 and wet stuff doesn't burn in your smoker, so I broke down and bought pellets, and they do, once you get those pellets lit, they burn a long, long time, so they do stay lit. Probably better, pine needles are fast, pine cones catch on fire, they burn for a while.
I keep a bag of wood pet chips or
Yep.
shaped bedding, just for them days when either because I keep my smoker fuel in a 5-gallon bucket with a screw-on lid. Well, every so often I've left the lid so that it gets wet inside, so my smoking fuel is dead, but at least I can reach into the bag that I keep inside the cab of the truck for those emergency times. Because my truck is my bee toolbox, just like Rogers is. So everything I need for bee work is in my truck. And so I just reach in back in my truck and grab a handful of pet shavings, and all is light real easily, especially underneath the torch.
Yep, pet, those bedding for like hamsters and gerbils and stuff works really good. I know that's what Gail uses.
Now, they have pine and cedar, which would you, which would be better?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
See, I'm
You're paying
fortunate.
for more, you're paying more for the cedar.
Yeah, I didn't.
Depends
know
on how
that there was
frugal you
a
are.
full span.
Well, that's what I have, cedar, but I'm fortunate because we have a cooper shop out there
Yeah.
that makes buckets and stuff, and so I have this big huge drum.
Bring
I
in a
just go
couple bags next time, would you?
And raid the cooper shop.
Jake, what do you use?
My neighbor has two pine trees, so I go and rake off their patio. They love me.
Yeah.
And also, grass smokes really well. Once you get the fire going, if you know that the grass hasn't been sprayed or anything, if you know, if it's your own yard and you got these clumpy up grass, let that dry out. You get your fire going, put that on top, makes some really nice smoke. Sumac seed pods also burn nice and they calm the bees down. That works. I've used that before. Bee brush, most of the kits do come with bee brushes. I own a couple bee brushes. I don't use them very much anymore. But when you're first starting out, you probably want a bee brush to kind of move the bees around. You don't want bees getting tangled in it. That's probably why I kind of quit, because if you really brush the heck out of them, they get stuck in it and they're not happy campers again.
And if you use that bee brush often, you get a little bit of honey on it. It's no big deal until the honey gets kind of hard. And then your brush is no longer a brush. It's kind of like a snow shovel.
Brush those bees back in so you don't smash them.
You know, and that's part of figuring out how to do things. The smoker, I usually smoke them to try to get them off that lip so they all go back in, so I can set the box back on top, restack it. Bee brushes turned into a scoop after it got placed up against the smoker. And that was one of the times the smoker was running, you know, it was burning. Hive tools, there's lots of different hive tools. I brought, there's about 3 different kinds sitting up here on the table. So afterwards, if you guys want to take a look. My favorite is that J hook there. Can pry the frames out with this. I can scrape with that end.
Get 2 hive tools. I've dropped one down through my hive before.
Yeah.
Get four.
Or you leave it somewhere and
Yeah.
yeah.
Stainless steel.
You plate, set it down and you can't find it for 2 weeks. Hopefully you don't find it with your lawnmower.
Roger, can we back up to smokers just for a second? The thing about a smoker is they do get hot, as Roger alluded to. But when you're done with the smoker, it's still gonna be hot. So depending on how far away you are from home, you may have to deal with either emptying it, shutting it off. You have to do something. So don't think you're gonna put it in the back of your truck, because you will have problems if it falls over, rolls around, gets up against a piece of wood, and you'll be famous. Your name will be in the paper.
Corks, like I got one over here that was given to me. Somebody, they figured out the entrance is the same size as the cork. I'll take some burlap and stuff it in the end. That puts the fire out. One over there does not have a guard on it. The guard, most of them have guards on now, but that kind of keeps it away from catching something on fire. We've all had those experiences. Sometimes mine burns better in the back of my truck going down the road.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I got
That's
a
what you
camp,
want.
I got
Never
a
go
camp on
out.
my truck. And you'd be driving down the road and you look in the mirror and it's just smoking like crazy. But you think it smoked the bees when I was working them? Hell no, I couldn't get it to smoke.
You can't keep it lit at the beehive, but as
No.
soon as you put it in the back of the truck.
Truck going down the road.
And then everybody, his brother's saying, your truck's on fire, your truck's on fire. No, that yellow one works really nice for like in the winter scraping frames. That, a lot of times, the long end or the non-painted edge, I'll use to break boxes apart because they tend to be ground a little sharper so that they get in between your boxes. So a lot of times I'll end up separating boxes with that yellow handled one. And then from there, I'll switch to the red handled one for pulling frame. So both of them work good. Some of them do one job better than the other, so don't be afraid to own both of them.
What David's talking about is this edge here is pretty sharp on these for some reason. They didn't bevel them back. I know I could just take a grinder and bevel it back, but
I've been too lazy, Roger.
when I think about I need to bevel this back is always when I'm in the bee yard doing bees, and by the time I get home, I'm so absent-minded, I forget about it. The Varroa Easy Check is something new. It's only been on the market a couple years. This is the way to check for mites. This made mite checking very, very easy. We used to put them in a jar and you'd shake them up with one lid, put a different lid on, and it was a mess. This has come up so much easier. They're $20. I recommend getting an easy check. Put the bees in there, the mites wash off. You're gonna have to kill a few bees. We'll talk about that later, but the Varroa Easy Check, there's one up here. Even has, I think, a mite in it.
So the bees go in the netted area there.
Yeah.
inside
Yeah.
that white-
Yep.
And
The
then
bee, the
then they're
lid
out
comes
next
off,
to
the bees are inside here, and then the
the
mites can
mites
come
fall
out
off.
of the, like a colander. When you first get your bees, you're probably gonna have to feed them. We feed them sugar water, and there's many different types of feeders. Some go in the front, these are front entrance feeders. There's some over here by the cafeteria window. These hold a couple quarts, you put a quart jar on these. You can rig up chicken feeders if you got chickens, so you don't even have to go out and buy them. You just need somewhere so the bees don't drown. You use something like chicken feeder, you gotta put some stones or some pine needles or something there, so the bees don't go swimming.
You can just take a quart jar and take a nail and knock some holes in it, and turn it upside
Yeah.
down, and they'll.
That makes the vacuum too. And then you just put a couple wood sticks underneath there, put the jar on top. Bees get to it. They make bigger feeders that go all the way across the front. This is like a whole hive feeder that goes on top. Put your sugar water inside the tray. The bees come up through the middle and they get in the screen, but they can't get in this area. So, and there's different kinds. The floats float on top of the water, but the ones I've always seen is they last a few years and then they start coming apart and then they don't hold sugar water. Because all this is wood, that's like this one here. I've used these before. I couldn't take them apart to clean them. Every once in a while, your sugar water sits in there too long, gets kind of funky. I never liked it because I couldn't take it apart to clean it. I have a couple of these styrofoam ones. They work pretty good. This is my favorite way if I have to feed a whole hive.
Works out good.
I own every one of those. If you look deep enough in my barn, there's one of all those in there.
So the one in the bottom right, when you take off the lid, you shouldn't be bothered by any bees at all. When you
Right.
feed them,
Right,
because they're all
they're all
held
underneath.
in.
So your lid seals along here, bees are inside the screen. Same with this one here. The other one, well, the only one you have bees on is the wood feeder up on top. Because the bees come up through the middle here, and then they walk on the wood slabs to get the sugar water. Always had some bees drown in my feeders. This feeder, you take a frame out, it goes in the place of a frame. You fill it with sugar water and there's a screen down the middle so the bees can walk up and down, but Larry was here last night. He has one of these and he called me up and said he had a bunch of dead bees, wanted to know if I had. Usually I don't, but this year I was feeding some nukes with these and I had quite a few dead bees. I have different feeders for different times of the year, just the same way with, because of the robbing issues. A lot of times you don't want that sugar water available, so the neighbor bees don't come over and start stealing. They'll steal that too. Emma?
Going back to the light testing stuff. what about the sugar?
What kind of sugar?
Oh, I don't recommend the sugar shakes. I recommend alcohol. Because you get a more accurate count. Unless you can really tune it down, but most people don't shake the bees hard enough with the sugar shake to start with. We made a video, Jamie and I did. We turned around and did the alcohol and we washed like 4 with the sugar shake and we watched another 4 or 5 off with the alcohol.
It's
So
been proven that
Yeah.
is not an effective way at all.
that
as far
was
as accuracy.
that was the first way. Back to everything seems to evolve. When I first started beekeeping, we didn't count mites. You just treated twice a year, the old-fashioned way. Then we decided they started doing the sugar shake where you put some bees in a jar with a bunch of powdered sugar, shake it. The mites agitated with all that powdered sugar, they fall off. Then you'd have to sift the sugar away from the mite so you could see the brown mites. And then somebody did some alcohol. It kills the bees, but we get a lot better count. We're killing 300 bees to save your 50, 60,000 bees in your hive. So they're also, as things evolve, there's some people working with CO2. So now they're trying to put the bees to sleep with CO2 to let the mites fall off, because the mites die. It's not enough to kill the bees, so you're not killing the bees. There's some people working on that. That's the new mite counts. So probably in 3 years, I'm gonna be telling you, oh, I don't buy these things here. We'll just be putting them to sleep, so.
One thing about, it might be coarse to hear that you have to kill 300 bees, but if you don't do this and you don't treat for mites, you're gonna lose your bees. You're more than likely, you're gonna lose your whole hive.
And at the same time, you gotta remember during the peak of the summer, she's laying 3,000 eggs a day potentially. So that 300 bees is diddly squat to her.
There's a term called superorganism. Basically what that means is there's an individual bee, but you could look at your whole hive as the actual organism. Right, so you're sacrificing 300 bees, but you're really saving the organism, the colony. The hive.
And the bottom one is a new fancier, holds about a gallon. It would go, instead of putting frames inside that box, you would put the box down, put the feeder on top, put the lid on so the bees can get to it. Like I said, in the fall, I'll use this if I don't have any other way. I don't like feeding in the front during the fall because that's when other hives are trying to rob the weaker hives. So yellow jackets can be issues. So I try to hide the sugar wire, hide it inside the hive so my neighboring bees, my own bees, can't find it. A lot of the commercial guys will use buckets, and that's because they're going to feed 2 or 3, 4, 5 gallon at a time. They aren't going to be back for a week. So I've never used the buckets. Dave,
I do.
you use a few buckets now.
Yeah, especially on my dukes and that there.
So just another way, there's many different ways. If you're a black and white person, you like things black and white, yes and no. Beekeeping is going to be difficult because there's many, many ways to do it. There's 10 experienced beekeepers here tonight. We all take care of bees. We're all successful and we all do things here. So that's why we try to bring a lot of people here. You can talk to Deb and, you pick up her tips, pick up my tips, Renee's, David's. We all do things a little different. You're going to need some protection from the bee, David.
As I put it, you get 10 beekeepers, you might get 15 different answers from that 10 beekeepers because.
And they're all right.
Yeah, and they're all right because sometimes what's working for this very exact moment for those 10 beekeepers will not work the next time for that same 10 beekeepers. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to take a shotgun approach potentially and throw a couple of different things at the wall and see what sticks for today.
And if you talk to us and our first part of our sentence is, it depends. It depends on what else is going on. So a lot of times we'll ask a lot of questions to try to get the big picture of what exactly is going on. It's usually, as a new beekeeper, you think this is your problem, but it could be a bigger problem, something more. Might not be as big a deal as you think, but it depends. It depends on what time of year. It depends if it's spring or fall. Protection. You're going to need at least a bale. And if you think I'm frugal, my mentor when I first started, the guy that helped me get started, he was really frugal because when he taught me, he goes, "This is all I needed. You just buy that and just use some gloves. That's all you need. The cheapest stuff you could buy. They work, but after about 2 years, I moved on. Most people start out, and I'm going to call it fully armored. You got the full suit, you got elastic bands, you put gloves on, you put the big veil on. And that's great. Once you start working the bees, you get a little more familiar with them, you know what's going on. Instead of having the big bulky gloves, instead of having these big bulky gloves on, like these, that are leather, the bees can't, very seldom will the bees ever stink through that. But the problem is, you get propolis on your gloves, and pretty soon when you, like that bubble gum, you put your fingers together, now they don't come apart. That was when I got rid of my cloth gloves, because I had no dexterity. So I learned to beekeep barehanded. You learn to be a very gentle beekeeper when you're working barehanded because you don't like getting stung a lot. And I used to get stung a lot. I wear nitrile gloves now. That keeps the propolis off my fingers, keeps the propolis off the steering wheel of my truck. The bees really don't like that stinging through it. They'll land on it, but very seldom do I get a stinger all the way through my nitrile gloves. Start out with protection. Get used to doing what you, so you're comfortable. You got to be comfortable in the hive. If you're nervous in the hive, the bees sense that, and you just kind of, they're like dogs. They sense that fear. You don't want to be fearful. So get a suit, get the protection, but always, always wear your veil. Like I said, I wear nitrile gloves. I know a lot of ladies seem to buy, they'll even buy the cheaper gloves or like these, and they'll put the dishwashing rubber glove over the outside of that, so the propolis is on that, they can wash those off. I've never seen the men wear those. Men love
I
wear.
worked out of Menards, they sell the extra large dishwashing gloves, and I've got to the point where last season, so I've worn them just as much as anything. And not to interrupt you, Roger, and I tend to do something a little different. I tend to wear a bee jacket, a ventilated bee jacket during the spring and fall. But during the middle of the summer, when it's 90, I'm working bees from sunrise till 1, 2 o'clock when I get lowly cooked off the yards. I'll end up switching over to a full ventilated suit, but I basically am naked underneath that suit because it's cooler then.
That's a picture.
That's,
We
you
know.
know, I knew that vision was coming. And so I was putting my-
TMI. Oh,
Well,
my
but I'm
Lord.
not saying I'm naked underneath there, but
Okay, that's enough, Dave.
what
That's
I'm
enough.
trying to say
No,
is
go
I'm
further.
basically-
Even gym shorts is way too much.
Yeah, well, yeah, but what I'm trying to say is I can stay cooler in a full good ventilated suit longer than if I even put a t-shirt on underneath that ventilated suit. Then I'll start cooking, so I end up switching halfway through the season to a full suit until I'm done typically with honey harvest and starts cooling off and the bees aren't as spicy potentially. Then I'll flip flop back the other way.
I
It gets hot in there.
yeah, it
Yeah,
gets,
oh yeah.
it gets really, really hot
And
working bees.
then it drips in your eyes.
So
Just recommend not to follow in pursuit when you have a full suit on.
And if you do, put a sign up.
Keep clothes on.
I have a canvas jacket over here. There's a dirty ventilated jacket because it's been in I've been wearing it half the summer since the last time I got washed. It was still in my truck. I've never wear the full suit. I always wear blue jeans. I have hairy legs. If I walk through my apiary with a pair of shorts on because I'm not doing bees that day, I will get a bee hits me in the leg and will sting me. I think it gets caught in the hairs of my legs. I've seen people wear my mentor veil, no shirt, shorts. Depends on what you
Rich
want
used
to
to
get
come out in
comfortable with.
flip flops and a pair of socks.
Yeah, so I always wear long blue jeans now because I, just like I said, if I walk through my apiary, I'll get stung in the legs. My veils are attached to the jacket. And like I said, I got a heavier canvas one I usually wear in the spring when it's colder out. I have a ventilated one for in the summer. But it is hot on a hot day. It's like people go, well, how hot is it? I go, well, you got a t-shirt on. Do you want to put a pair of long johns over the top? So, but
Is there a reason they're always white?
Yes.
basically because it's less aggravating for bees. Bees don't like dark colors, like black, dark blue shirts. We think that goes back to evolution and bears. Bears are black, so it's an evolutionary thing, but they really don't like dark colors.
To give you an example, I had some black socks. I had a hide that I was picking up that I bought at a state sale. It's late in the fall. The only thing on me that was black was a pair of black socks. And I got more stingers in that pair of black socks that evening than any place else. I mean, I didn't get bothered any place else, but boy, they sure tore me up in those black socks.
On the upside though, if you go out on a warm day, a lot of the field bees are gonna be out doing their work. So the hive, the field bees are, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, are probably more aggressive or territorial or whatever you want to call it, protective. And the nurse bees are home taking care of the brood and the other things. So on a warm day, you'll open that up and the field bees will be coming and going, but they're gonna be busy. They're gonna have jobs. The nurse bees will be inside, they're gonna be more laid back. The worst thing you can do is go on a wet, damp day. That's cool because everybody's home and nobody's happy.
Cloudy.
Especially if it's raining.
Yeah.
Right before a rainstorm, right after a rainstorm, during the rainstorm, they're not happy campers. The hive's gonna be full of bees. They all come back when it rains. The really young nurse bees can't sting you. So the older bees, their stingers just don't work when they're really new. So they're the bees working inside the hive. So if you go in, we recommend going in from about 11 o'clock through midday. You don't want to get real late in the day because everybody's coming, they've done their work for the day. They're coming home. They want to kick back, have a beer. They don't want Mr. Human going through the hive. So there are times where you need to work the bees. Summertime, the bees are pretty peaceful. They got all these flowers to go to. They're happy campers. They want to work. Just go work. You can pretty much work a veil, without a smoker, almost without a veil. I always wear the veil, but they're very peaceful. I can go, I'm working lots of hives like Dave. I can go days and days without getting stung, but spring and fall, well, you want smoker lit, you want to be extra careful. In the spring, they don't like that nice warm hive that's about 90 degrees. You open up that lid, all the heat comes out, it's 50 degrees out. It's cold quick, they get mad. This is part of the Ohio Revised Code. There are rules and regulations of keeping bees. And at the state level, they're all under the 909. We need to register our bees in Ohio. You send a check for each apiary. So if you just have bees in your backyard, it costs $5. If you have bees in your backyard and down the road at your friend's house, that's good. You got 2 apiaries, that's $10. You could have 50 hives in your backyard. It's just 1 apiary, $5.
Now, how's Michigan?
If you're from Michigan, they do not have a registration. We also have an inspection service. So when you sign up your $5, we have in the county budget, in each county, except Ottawa County, it's a line item. So the county's paying for somebody to come and inspect your hive. They're looking for what's better than a pandemic, but transmissible diseases. They want to know if you're going to have from a foul brood issues, that if your hive dies, my hive comes over and steals it, it can move from hive to hive. It's very dead. It kills all the baby bees. So your hive's going to collapse. So the way to do this is there is an inspection service, and that's part of the $5 fee. They'll come out and inspect your hive maybe once a year. And you need to register your bees. There's some other things. So it's under the Ohio Revised Code. There's some best management practices and stuff with the Ohio Department of Agriculture. And I always put this in about buyer beware about the packages, and I've never really gotten taken on a nuke, but I've had people call me and go, what does it mean to have release the queen? And really you should have just walked away and want your money back because you're not buying what you were given. And so always be careful. In Ohio, when somebody sells bees, you're supposed to have a certificate of inspection. David and I both sell nukes. Deb sells nukes. We have a certificate from the state of Ohio that says we've been inspected and we are apparently disease-free on that. So I always tell people, ask to see the certificate. You should see the certificate. If you're buying package bees, you go to the dealer, they should at least have a certificate from wherever the bees come from. They came from Georgia. They should show you a certificate that those bees were disease-free. And nobody hardly ever asks, but you know, it's something you probably should do. Here are some local bee suppliers. David's in the back. Deb's sitting here. I'm here. Dwight Wilson lives in Findlay. Jeff Watzkowski is here in Toledo. He's a club member. We all sell nukes. We have bees that we sell. We have, David and I have, and Deb have more bees than we know what to do. If you're a good beekeeper, you can have more bees than you know what to do. Some years you have more bees than you know what to do with. You sell them. The next year you're buying. Right, Gail?
Yes.
Gail's sold. Gail's might be buying this year.
Yep.
Um,
Thanks to the site.
yeah. Brad Hibbard is a member. He lives in Napoleon. He sells packages. White Sawyer sells packages in Swanton. And Tom Rathburn lives in Clyde. All these packages are from the same area in Georgia. So there's markup at different prices, different dates. Brad and Tom get them on the same day. So March 29th, April 12th, April 26th, 5/10. I will tell you as a brand new beekeeper, the first time with bees, if you buy a package, don't be getting them real early. Go more for the 4/26. That's usually when dandelions bloom, our weather's warmer. If you get them at the end of March, we all know what the weather can be at the end of March, 1st of April. It could be really cold, nasty. You're trying to feed your bees. I've had people go through this class and their first package died because it was so cold, they couldn't get the bees to even eat that sugar water. So wait just a little bit. The weather's a little more dependable. Pick the later dates. Even 5/10 is not too late. I'm sure, you know, like I said, you probably want to get on a list sooner than later if you want to keep bees.